Welcome to Adoption Matters, where our adoptee trispective approach honors every voice in the adoption constellation and helps families grow stronger together. Today is a very special episode. We are honored to present our 2026 Shaping the Future Award to someone who has profoundly impacted the adoption community, Kelly Widner. But before we introduce Jean, I want to share the importance of this award and what it represents. The Shaping of the Future Award acknowledges the efforts of individuals and organizations who are committed to encouraging dialogue across the adoption constellation. We know that a fuller view of adoption complexity grows a more complete picture, strengthens relationships, and honors each individual personal experience. We believe the primary purpose of adoption is to meet the needs of adoptees over the course of their lives. We are dedicated to fostering communication, education, and dialogue between adoptees and families who love them. Together, we can grow a more accurate, empathetic understanding of the adoption experience. To accomplish this, we believe it is imperative for all members of the adoption triad to meet and share their respective point of views with one another, while always being mindful that the purpose of adoption is to provide a family to a child and secondarily to meet the needs of birth parents or adoptive parents. Our work fosters a deeper appreciation of the realities of adoption, grief and loss issues, identity development, and the complex consequences of adoption. To nurture adopted children well, we must be committed to truth-telling and truth-seeking. For this to occur, we encourage members of the adoption triad to communicate with one another.
And so it is with great pride and gratitude that we present this 2026 Shaping the Future Award to Jean Widner. Jean, you want to lift up your award?
Oh, wow. Thank you so much.
This award is presented to you, Jean, in recognition of your powerful work through the adoption paradox, which brings clarity, compassion, and honesty to adoption conversations. Through your writing, you help others understand the complex realities of adoption for adoptees, birth mothers, and adopted parents, inviting readers to see adoption as a layered human experience that deserves honesty, empathy, and ethical reflection. Jean, congratulations. We are honored to present this award to you.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you all so very, very much. One of the greatest and most unexpected pleasures has been getting to know individuals and organizations such as yours at Growing Intentional Families Together. The work that you all have done since 2010 in terms of bringing together all parts of the adoption constellation and understanding the importance of a holistic and family-centered and child-centered point of view is something that is badly needed. And I so appreciate the work that you guys have already put forward into the space and that I know that you will continue to.
Thank you, Jean. Jean, thank you. And we really likewise appreciate the work that you've done. I mean, I know you've spent many years researching the book that you have that's still relatively new, The Adoption Paradox, putting adoption into perspective. And you being an adoptee yourself. And I must say, born in that wonderful, beautiful year of 1965, which would be me too, and adopted from birth, Washington State. I just want to kind of give a little more about Jean to people listening and watching. She lives actually the adoption paradox that she writes about, experiencing both love and loss, belonging and separation. In her book, she shares stories from all sides of the adoption triad, alongside insights from mental health experts, bringing clarity and compassion to a subject that's often wrapped in silence and misconception even today. Through her writing, Jean invites readers to see adoption not as a simple narrative of rescue or loss, but as a layered human experience that deserves honesty, empathy, and ethical reflection. Jean lives in southern Nevada with her husband Kyle and 2 dogs. And what kind of dogs are they, Jean?
Golden retrievers.
The great Goldens, the lovable dogs.
Yeah.
And she continues her passion in storytelling through her work in the adoption community. So again, Jean, welcome. Thanks for everything you do.
Thank you. Thank you again so much.
Yes.
Sally, your camera's not on.
Here, my camera's not on. Okay, you guys keep going.
Okay, there you are.
It keeps popping off.
It just
Alright.
flashed back.
Well, Jean, I'd like to start by asking you what brings you to this work and what led you to dedicate so much of your life to the adoption, education, and advocacy.
Candidly, I sort of fell into it. I did not, set out with any sort of designs on any of this. I simply went through my own personal awakening after both of my adopted parents had departed this earth and started to think about different possibilities about how to frame, both my history and my future. And in the course of that, I'd also become sort of a quasi-professional writer and got the idea, why don't I write a book after I had begun my own search for birth family for the first time and felt that opening up within myself and started to look at things differently. And then I started to read some other books that had already been written out there, and all of that started to open my eyes. And when I initially started to write The Adoption Paradox, I mean, honestly, I thought I was writing a book that would be exploring the emotional complexities of it. And I knew that I definitely wanted some research. My adoptive father was a school psychologist. I mean, I was always intimately interested in the psychological well-being of all of us and just how we tick and what makes us tick and what makes us into the people that we are, both our struggles, because I went through struggles with my adoptive family, as well as, how we triumph and the internal work that goes into that. And so that's what I thought I was writing about. Once I started to kick open the parameters of the stories that people were relaying to me, both adoptees, adoptive families, and also, first or natural parents, I started to come into an awareness that we had a system here that was thinking it was serving the needs of the people involved and yet failing to do so. And that was when the awakening for advocacy started within me, that it's like, okay, if this is where we are, how can we make this better? And what are the things that are going to need to happen in order to do that? And so I really back-ended into this. I'm still making it up as I go. I make it up every day right now, in terms of really still formulating what I think are the right paths, for us to try to take as a society. And I think we have to remain open. The thing that I do believe, though, is that we can do that. We can make a difference. We can make this better for families, for children. And it's going to take a bit of a movement, I think, to make that happen, but I don't see it as being impossible. I see it as something that is something that we can accomplish in our society. We just need help. And so if in some tiny, small way I've now become a part of that, and if my book helps open those minds and those eyes and those doors, then hallelujah,
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, you've been doing this work for years, but now that your book has been published, you can see how it has affected each of the groups: adoptees, birth parents, natural parents, and adoptive parents. What do you find most challenging for the adoption constellation?
Whew. Traditionally, we've seen ourselves siloed. We've seen ourselves like adoptees are over here, and, first birth parents are over there, and adoptive families are over there, and, therapists and legislative things are yet, their own kind of thing. And I think that that's one of the things that we really are going to need to try to challenge ourselves with, our own internal growth and our growth as again, wanting to make things better for families, but also I think legislatively, is to try to start to understand that this actually sits at this nexus of a whole bunch of different social situations. It interacts with, of course, women's reproductive rights and access to reproductive care. It intersects with our economy. And are we able to create stable and financially thriving families on a mass scale in our society and in our individual communities? And how well are we doing at that with our young people? Because what we're also realizing, and what again is a thing that I didn't know until I began this research, is how much economic hardship creates a child welfare system that then continues to feed on itself, if you will. And that if we don't have families with sufficient resources, that inevitably ends up impacting the financial well-being of that family, which impacts their physical well-being, which then means their children are going to run into trouble. And so as we are failing to see this interconnectedness in our society, both again as operative families, as individual citizens, and then also legislatively, there isn't going to be another way that we can truly be child-centered or family-centered until we understand the intersection of all of those things. And that's what I think we have the ability to raise our voices and to do that. And so, that's what we're trying to do. And that's what you're seeing is more conversation about family preservation. And you're starting to see the needle move on that. However slight, it is getting better. So let's keep at it.
We're pushing back against that narrative of adoption as a perfect solution.
Right. Because it
No.
isn't.
No, it's not.
Adoption creates a different family for a child. It does not necessarily guarantee a better family for a child. And it ignores the high human costs that then we're just pushing around on the board, but we're not really actually solving.
Agreed. Jean, you mentioned that you got into this for one reason, and then you ended up, discovering another purpose. And you said you wanted to open the eyes, the minds, and doors. And so that as we look to the future, how's that going to play out in the future?
Well, there's what I'd like to see, and then there's the way it's going to go. But I mean, what I'd like to see though is I think the general public can have their minds and eyes opened. One of the things that I did know pretty early on in the writing of my book is I wanted a book that would be embraced by a community that I could see was already there. Your organization was a part of it. We know, like, for example, in 2020 is when you had all of these, sort of support groups that moved online. So the pandemic ends up being a sort of an odd blessing, actually, for the adoption constellation, because then all of this support actually moved online and then became visible and accessible in a way that it hadn't been. And so that created a community. And I could see that what my book was becoming and what was being said and shared based upon both the interviews that I did and also the research that I found along the way, I knew I wanted a book that would speak to them and could also go outside. And so I deliberately tried to create a book that would be accessible to the general public. That's someone who maybe they do have a direct connection to adoption somewhere in their family. Maybe they don't, but for whatever reason have become interested and are willing to pick up a book on adoption and crack the spine and see what it has to say. What I've always said to, many of my friends and also to anyone else, in the community, I want to make you ask yourself different questions that you never even knew you needed to ask. And so that really is my goal, is to try to explain the real costs of adoption, both for individuals and for our society at large, the ways that it can help, the ways that it can hurt, the ways that it should be able to fulfill its potential. our potential import is to try to have a safe, loving, permanent home for every child, because every child deserves that. You know, there are very few things that we can universally agree on this planet, but I think that all children should be safe and loved and raised and well cared for is a universal one. And we all know that, of course, permanency is a better way to do that than having a child, unfortunately, in one temporary situation after another in a foster care environment. So everybody agrees on that. Like so many other things in our culture, what we disagree about is how to get there. But the thing of it is our larger cultural narrative is that adoption is always a win-win-win. That this is, of course, a social good. And it's like, well, its
Yeah.
intentions are, it can be, it should be, but we fall short. And we fall short because we don't understand. And so it's about really opening up, you know, the minds of folks who just have never given this a second thought, who've just assumed that all is well, everything's fine, there's nothing more to this. And it's about trying to have an honest, complex conversation that says, okay, how can we do this better? And to really allow us to flourish and have ideas to think aspirationally about how we can have stronger families, how we can create a child welfare system that actually tries to achieve its own goals. Because sometimes we can, and we all know there are amazing families out there. There are amazing social workers out there doing good work, and we all know that. And we're still not there yet. You know, everyone here also knows the ways that we failed. And so let's try to keep shrinking that number and then growing the other. So I don't know.
Yeah.
That's what gets me moving.
You know, we want to honor, increase this idea of family preservation. I think foster care workers do that. But at the same time, there's that economic piece, that socioeconomic piece that doesn't match up with that, because we need more funding for preservation of first families and more education and more rehabilitation efforts. Yeah, so it's tricky.
It is.
On the other side of that is this adoption myth for those like me who couldn't have children biologically, like this idea it's a solution and it's like a fairy tale, right? It's going to solve all problems. And we know that adoption isn't that. It
Right.
has many things that have to be worked out. We can still, you said it, family, but we're a different family. Yeah. Than a bio family. Yeah. And so for so many years we've been told love is enough. And we realize now it's not. So yeah. Looking
So
forward to your next book.
Don't know what that's going to be right now. But thank you for that.
Jean, what's been the most gratifying thing about the way your book has been received?
When people have reached out to me to say things like, I feel seen, you know, I feel heard, or, you know, even, you know, like I have a friend locally where I live where, you know, she's an adopted individual and she has a pretty good relationship with her siblings. And yet, you know, handed over my book to her sibling and she was like, it got better. It was like, you know, they didn't have any real friction, but yet it was eye-opening. And then they got to talk about things that they'd never really had the words for. And so, you know, that's the thing is if we can help people who don't know the words, find the words to say, well, is that true? Do you feel like that? And then that person can say, no, that isn't true for me, but you know what is? And it's the conversations, because through conversations is how we connect. So
Well,
that's been the best, without a doubt.
yeah. Well, the truth telling opens the door to important conversations. Yeah.
Right. Right.
especially in reunion. I think that's so wise, to have someone to put down in words the things that you're thinking about that you can share with people that you didn't get a chance to grow up with, so they can understand from your perspective how you feel and think.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. Yeah. And to try to make more successful reunions,
Yeah.
to try to help smooth those waters because they're tough. Reunions are tough. It is not an easy success story, which
Mhm.
again is something else our culture just they see the headlines, oh, isn't that sweet? And on they
Yeah.
go. And
All the rainbows and unicorns.
yeah, yeah.
And that it's not linear, it has its ups and downs. And it's
Correct.
sometimes it's pauses.
Right. And help people learn how to hold space for that with each other.
Mhm.
you know
Exactly.
that it's like, well, you know what, this new thing just kind of kicked open in me and now I need to feel on that, and I might hurt you, so I might need to step away for a minute, like how to have those conversations again among families. So
Mhm.
super important.
And for family, it's basically often an intimate stranger. You're family, but I don't know you. You're
Yeah,
family, but you don't know me.
well said, intimate
Yes.
stranger, I love that. Mm.
Yeah, that's the paradox adoptees find themselves in anyway. They're placed with strangers, their family is strangers. You look in the mirror and you're a stranger at 16. I mean, everything is unfamiliar.
Yeah, no, it's hard work, it's hard work.
Right. Well, and we really appreciate the courage that you show to do this emotional work because these kind of conversations take an emotional toll. You're digging deeper in a public forum with people. You're trusting that they receive your words and hold your words respectfully and listen and learn. And that takes a toll. And so we appreciate that you do that.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
It does. There's no question. There are some times when I've had to step away,
Mhm.
when I've had to realize, nope, this isn't the one you're going to win today. Maybe not ever.
Mhm.
So step away.
Everyone who's written a book, just about, they say they find it somewhat cathartic. Just being able to put the words on the page and go through the experience and think about and feel. It's amazing work, and I thank you for doing it.
Thank you. Yeah, one thing about interviewing 100 different people for your book is you don't have to face your own stuff until later, because it always comes back around, doesn't it?
My
Yeah.
suspicion is it stirs it up nonetheless.
Yes, it does.
Well, Jean, if you could leave our listeners and us with one nugget for each person in the constellation of at least the triad. I, I think let's start, since I asked the question here, let's start with adoptive parents.
What are my words of wisdom or words of advice to adoptive parents?
Yeah, one nugget.
Hmm. It's about them and it's not about you. It's about your child. It's
Mhm.
not about you.
Jean, a nugget for first and birth parents?
Oh, find a way to give yourself grace and own your stuff and try to stay open to the best possible relationships that you can with your son or daughter and with everyone else that is in their lives. And once again, it's actually not about you. It's about them. Do your
Absolutely.
do your own work, right? That's
Your
that's
own
a
work,
universal
yes.
phrase. Do your own work.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'll ask about the adoptee.
Okay.
Seeing as how we're doing the triad, and we live
Sure.
in that space, I'd love to
Yeah.
hear what you have to say.
For us, it's like, again, at some point, we have to find our agency. We have to take charge of our narrative and our story, however that is. Whatever happened, however you came to be with the folks that you're with. Was it a good situation? Was it a horrible situation? Whatever it is, we can heal we can always find ways to honor our story, to honor our journey, and speak the truth, and find ways to hold love in our lives, to self-parent if that's what we need to do whatever, but to never give up, and to know that we're all worthy of love, and to remember that, and to go out and seek that, you know. I think that it's really important that we have to bring it home, no matter what. We have to bring it home to us. So
That
That's
was
beautiful.
absolutely beautiful. Jean, thank you so much for being here today, for this receiving this award. And most of all, thank you for the work that you do every single day to shape a better future for adoptees and the entire adoption constellation. To our listeners, if you'd like to know more about Jean's work, visit adoptionparadox.com. And if you've been impacted by Jean's work, we'd love to hear from you. Reach out to us at giftfamilyservices.com. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you, Jean, for being a light in this community.